Sergeant, make sure he doesn't get away.
In 1962, a reasonably low-budget movie adaptation of a popular spy thriller novel launched a super franchise that endures to this day. This film helped redefine the spy movie, turned its mostly unknown star into a superstar, and made the character into a household name. I want to say it's Bob something. Dr. No.
If you carry a 00 number, it means you're licensed to kill, not get killed.
007, Licensed to Kill, British Secret Service, Volta PPK, M, Miss Moneypenny, and one of cinema's most famous introductions.
Bond. James Bond.
James Bond has been around for decades, and this, his first cinematic outing, would set the scene for decades of adventures. Some good, some not so good, and then there's Die Another Day.
1 medium dry vodka martini, mixed like you said, sir, and not stirred.
In 1953, Ian Fleming published his first novel, a spy thriller about a high-stakes game of chemin de fer. No, me neither. It's like Baccarat. No, me neither. Anyway, it's a card game played in casinos. The book was called Casino Royale, and it detailed the exploits of a British Secret Service agent named James Bond. James Bond was a real-life ornithologist whose name was borrowed by Fleming as it was the dullest name he could think of. The dullest name I can think of is that of the dullest person I know. His name is so excruciatingly dull that I dare not say it, since just reading his name can be dangerous if you happen to be operating heavy machinery. This person, who I shan't name, is an insomnia specialist, where for $100 he will video chat with you for 10 minutes, tell you what he got up to that day, what he ate for breakfast, how many vacation days he has saved up, and a detailed outline of his self-published fantasy novel. And if you're not unconscious by minute 7, you get a full refund. Casino Royale was a sleeper hit, no pun intended, but as Fleming released more and more titles throughout the 1950s, public awareness of the Bond character increased.
Forget the usual repartee. 007's in a hurry.
In the mid-50s, there was an Americanized live television production of Casino Royale starring Barry Nelson as Jimmy Bond, who faced off against Peter Lorre as Le Chiffre. It's because of Fleming selling the rights to this book that Casino Royale has had such an unusual relationship to the other James Bond films. The film rights to Casino Royale are their own story, resulting in another 2 feature films based on the book. And it's also the ultimate trivia night question. What is the name of both the best James Bond movie and the worst James Bond movie?
Incredible.
Dr. No starts with British intelligence operatives in Jamaica being murdered, and M, the head of the British Secret Service, sends secret agent 007 James Bond to investigate. People start following Bond, and the more he investigates, the more they try to kill him. Why kill Bond? He looks like such a nice young man in his Savile Row suit. All through the various assassination attempts, Bond remains as cool as a cucumber, assuming of course that the cucumber was stored in a cool dry place and not left out in the Arizona sun. People trying to kill you, well, that's just an occupational hazard if you're a spy. But after the 20th attempt on his life, Bond twigs that something might just possibly be up. After Bond has dispatched approximately 1/3 of the population of Jamaica, he comes up against his ultimate foe, Dr. No, who's half German, half Chinese, and played by New York actor Joseph Wiseman. So this is a combo that's aged about as well as historical ads for child medications, now with added cocaine. Dr. No has metal hands, which is inconvenient since he has to put them in check-in luggage when he flies. On the plus side, he never needs to use a bottle opener. Unless, of course, he's on a plane. Dr. No has created technology for interfering with the trajectory of missiles, and Bond has to stop him. It was a simpler time for thrillers. No dead family members killed by collateral damage or bad childhood traumas or avalanches for Bond. Just a fairly bad guy and a good guy. The good guy, it must be said, is somewhat of a dickhead at times, which is probably why everyone in Jamaica is trying to kill him.
It's that Bond guy. He's just the worst. Open fire.
Bond teams up with a woman that he meets on the beach, Honey Ryder, and the pair are captured and taken to Dr. No's lair, where Bond is wined and dined before bollocksing up Dr. No's nefarious scheme. And with that, we had an entertaining action thriller and a template. By 1962, several producers and studios were interested in making a feature film adaptation of Bond, but UK-based Canadian producer Harry Saltzman had the options. He was running out of time and money, and so when a UK-based American producer, Albert R. Cubby Broccoli, approached Saltzman with the idea of buying out his interest in Bond, Saltzman instead suggested a partnership, and Eon Productions was formed. The pair met with executives at United Artists and hammered out a deal to make a celluloid version of Ian Fleming's novels. Dr. No was eventually chosen as the first movie, since it was a relatively small-scale story and didn't have any legal encumbrances like their preferred choice, Thunderball. Choosing Dr. No over, say, On Her Majesty's Secret Service would save them an absolute fortune in Letraset. Several writers were engaged, Wolf Mankiewicz and Richard Maybaum, the latter going on to script several Bonds right through the 1980s. Joanna Harwood also worked on versions of the script. Before the film's release, Mankiewicz, despite having introduced Broccoli and Saltzman, had become embarrassed by his association with the project and asked to have his name removed. Ouch. He would also work on the 1967 version of Casino Royale. Also, ouch. Early drafts featured the twist of introducing the title character as a pet monkey, but sanity prevailed and they instead went with a story that was as close to the novel as possible. Imagine if the Hobbit trilogy had just kept to the book. It would just be a half-hour episode of Amazing Stories.
What's so funny about it?
Nothing.
Director Terence Young was tapped to direct, and after a long search, the relatively unknown Scottish actor Sean Connery was chosen after a long casting process, revealed him to be the best of a bad bunch. The studio and producers weren't certain about Connery.
Oh, the evil of it all, trying to down a man before he's even had a chance to fight!
An actor who not really stood out too much in previous roles like Darby O'Gill and The Little People.
Michael.
Don't hit me, you fucking idiot! That was until somebody decided to ask a woman what they thought of him.
I have to leave immediately.
Oh, that's too bad.
And that was that. James Bond, Agent 007, has a license to kill. Also, less well known, he has a small boat operator's license and also a television license so he can watch EastEnders. Bond, as written in the books, is an English public school educated adventurer, while Connery's Bond is a Scottish brawler who needed some coaching from director Terence Young in how to be cool and suave.
You never take me to dinner looking like this, James. You never take me to dinner, period.
Terence Young, who, like Ian Fleming, thought he was the real James Bond, with all that jet-setting and fine wine, and hopefully no executions. Sean Connery was, by all accounts, a diamond in the rough when cast, which was ironic since he would be defining cool elegance for decades to come. I too once defined cool elegance for a time, especially after that video of me falling down the stairs and injuring myself while wearing a tuxedo print t-shirt was featured on Funniest Home Videos. Dr. No would set up a lot of the things that we associate with the Bond franchise, as produced by Broccoli and Saltzman. Bond's boss, M, played by Bernard Lee, was a distant curmudgeon at times, but with the national interest at heart. M's secretary, Miss Moneypenny, was played by Lois Maxwell. Moneypenny carries a torch for Bond, while he teases her about his wish to take her to dinner. Now, she really shouldn't have bothered. Bond is renowned as a skinflint whenever the company isn't picking up the tab. Realistically, the best she could have hoped for was going halves in a portion of fish and chips. There's an appearance from the armourer, Major Boothroyd, later known as Q.
Walter PPK.
Bond's famous Walter PPK is introduced. At the time it was used by many agencies such as the CIA, but in later films would apparently only be used by Bond.
Walter PPK.
Only one person we know uses this sort of gun. James Bond.
Which really must suck for the people at Walter, who are still making the damn things, but for whatever reason cannot sell them to anybody else because only Bond is known to use them. And that is a poor business model to have a factory set up to make all of the pistols just for one customer. Bond has no gadgets in the film whatsoever. Not even an electric toothbrush with a flamethrower built into it, or a watch with a garrote and a flamethrower built into it. Not even a pair of X-ray specs with a flamethrower built into it. He just has to get by using his wits. God help us.
What should I say to an invitation from a strange gentleman?
Bond is irresistible to women. Even the ones who want to kill him sleep with him first. I mean, there's no problem with that, just so long as they do things in the right order. Bond hooks up with 3 women in this film. Sylvia Trench was meant to be the girl that Bond always has to leave in the lurch while he runs off to save England or whatever, but that only lasted for the first 2 movies. Miss Tara is actively anti-Bond, but sleeps with him anyway because, yeah, why not? Girls got needs. And then there is Honey Rider. The Bond movies were set up in a way to send everybody home in a randy mood, and as such could possibly be categorized as a marital aid, where it probably has the same effect as Christmas or a prolonged power outage.
This one is worth $50 in Miami.
Honey Rider is a young woman who sneaks into Dr. No's prohibited waters to dive for seashells, which I'm reliably told she sells the seashells on the seashore. The shells she sells are seashells, I'm sure, for if she sells seashells on the seashore, then I'm sure she sells seashore shells. Oh, and she also killed the man who once took advantage of her.
It took him a whole week to die.
Well, it wouldn't do to make a habit of it.
Swiss-German actress Ursula Andress is, like most of the Bond women in the 60s,
How can you eat at a time like this?
dubbed by another actress, though she would use her own voice in the 1967 version of Casino Royale.
Beside Baccarat, he deals in lechery.
Ursula Andress's screen entrance is something that has become one of the most iconic scenes in a Bond film. Even people who've never seen Dr. No know this scene. One deleted scene, though, has Sean Connery attempting to explain to Moneypenny Honey Rider's business model.
You see, Moneypenny, she sells the seashells on the seashore. The shells she sells are seashells, I'm sure. For if she sells seashells on the seashore, then I'm sure she sells seashore shells.
Quarrel is possibly one of the many people who wants to kill Bond, but it turns out he's working for the British and the Americans. Jack Lord appears as the first on-screen Felix Leiter, and he would go on to star in the series Hawaii Five-0 for over a decade.
There's a dragon.
What?
Native superstition. Started by Dr. No, probably.
Sean Connery proved to be the film's biggest surprise, embodying a different kind of Bond to that envisaged by book readers. Terence Young made it his business to smooth down some of Connery's rough edges, but retain his air of danger, though that may have just been down to his choice of beans and sausages for breakfast. Connery even slept in a tuxedo, which isn't that unusual, except here no pub crawl was involved.
It's a Smith & Wesson. And you've had your 6.
Bond at this stage, though, was not superhuman.
Of course I'm scared too.
And so his encounter with a tarantula makes him sick to his stomach. The music in this is mainly a British man's idea of Jamaican music, so it's mainly calypso-style music, which was very big at the time with the chattering classes. John Barry was brought in to take composer Monty Norman's score for a James Bond theme and arrange it in a way to give it some zip. There would be a later court case that would eventually find in favour of Monty Norman being the undisputed composer of the James Bond theme. But on the other hand, it was John Barry who would go on to score 11 more Bond films. How many times have most viewers heard the James Bond theme in their lives? Now, whatever that number, double it for anybody who lives next door to a 13-year-old learning the guitar. Production designer Ken Adam took simple ideas and turned them into visually impressive spaces. One room is basically nothing but made interesting with shadow and a bit of light. Dr. No's lair is suitably villainous, complete with Goya's painting of the Duke of Wellington that at the time had recently been stolen in real life. Dr. No has a lot of action, but it's spaced out while Bond investigates. But when a fight or chase kicked in, they were unlike similar scenes in other films. The editing by Peter Hunt should also be mentioned, where his signature jump cuts to speed up the action became so important to the Bond style in the early 60s. Some folks were appalled by the violence in Dr. No, and even the filmmakers were quite tentative about Bond's ruthlessness. Originally, he emptied his entire clip into Dent.
I think they were on their way to a funeral.
Dr. No would show Bond's use of one-liners designed to undercut the violence.
There are no such things as dragons. What you saw was something that looked like one.
Dr. No is the most restrained Bond film of all. The format we know and love was only partially informed by this film, with the gun barrel graphic and the theme tune and the basic mechanics of the British Secret Service, but there was still room to grow. It was made for a relatively meagre budget for an action film,
$1 million, Mr. Bond.
which in 1962 was still a lot of money for anything other than an action film. The budget is used well. The Jamaican locations were exotic for people used to harsh European winters, and even though we only saw fairly prosaic locations, a glimpse of Jamaica was really much more than most folks in the US and Europe could ever hope to experience in the days before air travel became much more common.
I'm a member of Spectre.
Spectre?
Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, Extortion.
The film is generally beautifully made, even if the back projection is as obvious as the miniskirt that Auntie Beryl wore to her niece's wedding. The action is exciting and the acting solid throughout. The revelation is Connery just being so perfect for the role.
Stay where you are.
I can assure you my intentions are strictly honourable.
There are minor things to consider, like how are Dr. No's mechanical hands powered? I mean, they're obviously not hand cranked. Or maybe they just take batteries. But if so, what size batteries and where does he get them from?
You see, Moneypenny, penny. She sells seashells on the seashore.
The ending is a little small scale compared to later films, but this was still a James Bond film that was made to be an adaptation of Fleming's novel. Dr. No is what they used to call a smash, with boffo box office and legs longer than the average Bond woman. It redefined what people expected of a spy movie and changed the worldwide perception of British spies being gentlemen adventurers. Bond was just a thug with a tuxedo and a gun, but he wore it well and we enjoyed his adventures anyway. James Bond will return in From Russia with Love, where even more people try to kill Bond. If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.
You'll all be sorry, you rats!